This is the former Polish post office in the free city of Danzig. On the 1st of September 1939, the very first day of World War II, local SS and police attacked the post office. Inside were a group of around 58 people, postal workers who had had some military training and, in some cases even, had quite a lot of military experience. After a battle lasting all day, they surrendered. Instead of being treated as prisoners of war, after all, the attackers had invaded sovereign Polish territory as if they had invaded an embassy, the defenders were treated as terrorists. As they were not in military uniform, they were put on trial and sentenced to death, even though in the free city of Danzig the death sentence was not on the statute books. The man who sentenced them to death was Kurt Bode. After the free city of Danzig was annexed to Nazi Germany, the death sentence was used by Bode to kill more than 3,000 people, not criminals, but people who resisted National Socialism. In this video, I will look at the life of Kurt Bode and the crimes he committed, and show you, as always, what these places look like today. Kurt Bode was born in Poznan, then called Poznań, on the 6th of February 1895. He studied law at the University of Greifswald, the same university and the same subject as Herbert Lange, a major National Socialist criminal responsible for tens of thousands of murders, on whom I published a 5-part series, a link to which can be found below. Lange, however, was much younger, so they did not come across each other at university. Bode finished his studies in 1920 and went on to the free city of Danzig to pursue his career. The free city of Danzig had been made a sort of independent country, the aim of which was to provide the newly recreated state of Poland access to the sea, whilst the overwhelmingly German-speaking population was not forced to being transferred into Poland. When I say a sort of independent country, that is what it was. Whereas it had its own parliament and its own laws, the Polish state had rights over it which would not normally be granted to a second country over one which is independent. There was a great deal of resentment towards Poland in the free city of Danzig. During the Polish-Bolshevik War, dockers had refused to unload war materials destined for Poland to fight the communists. The Polish government realised that it could not rely on the workforce in Danzig to do its work, so it created a new port a few kilometres north in the city of Gdynia. In normal times this would have caused problems. However, in times when world trade was drastically reduced, this caused major hardship for almost everyone living in the free city of Danzig, not just those who worked in the port. Danzig no longer had its hinterland. In May 1933, the Nazi Party won the only election it ever won by taking a majority of the seats in the Volkstag, the parliament of the Free City. It was around the time of the May 1933 elections to the Volkstag that Bode joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, membership number 2840968. There were, of course, many people who joined the Nazi Party at this time. Membership may have seemed to many to be a sine qua non as far as career advancement was concerned. Bode also became a member of the NSV, the National Socialist People's Welfare Organization, and the National Socialist Military Veterans Organization, the NS Reichskriegerbund. For a short time, he also served as Gau legal advisor for the Reichsgau Danzig, West Prussia. 7 months after the National Socialists had taken control of the Volkstag, at the beginning of January 1934, Bode was appointed District Court Director at the Danzig District Court, and at the beginning of August 1934, he was appointed Senior Court Judge. At the beginning of April 1938, he was appointed Vice President of the Danzig High Court. From August 1939 to February 1940, he worked for the security service of the Reichsführer SS, a move, I suspect, which would have been contrary to his role as a judge. It was during this time that on the 8th of September 1939 he presided over a court-martial against the defenders of the Polish postal service in Danzig and pronounced death sentences against all 28 defendants. On the 29th of September 1939, a further 10 people whose injuries were such that it had been deemed unfit to stand trial on the 8th of September 1939 were also put on trial and also sentenced to death by Bode. The defenders of the Polish post office were executed by shooting, although the usual way of administering the death penalty was by beheading. Of course, that is in Germany, and this was not yet part of Germany. Beheading was usually done by the guillotine, although sometimes it was also done by the axe. I've done videos on this subject, links are below. Hitler later ordered hanging to be introduced. This form of execution was not in line with Prussian tradition, although it was the usual form of execution in his native Austria. Hanging was seen as being particularly demeaning. During his time as judge, Bode sentenced around 3,000 people to death. As a trained lawyer, Bode realized that his behavior was criminal. As the Red Army approached the border of East Prussia around Christmas 1944, Bode had the guillotine and gallows removed from the Danzig court prison and instructed the president of the higher regional court, Walter Wohler, to destroy the files of the special courts which had been responsible for such flagrant abuse of the law. His last indictments date from the 3rd and 7th of March 1945, shortly before Danzig was taken by the Red Army. On the 15th of March 1945, Bode closed his office and then went as a reservist as a first lieutenant to the army. He was taken prisoner by the Soviets, and it is possible that he found his way into the Danzig Matzkow camp, which had been a place for punishing SS men who had broken the law, and which was being then used for prisoners of war by the Red Army. A link to a video on that camp is also provided below. Bode was one of the lucky ones as far as POWs captured by the Soviet Union were concerned. Perhaps because of his age, he was now 53. He was released into the British occupation zone on the 8th of January 1949. In the western zones of occupation, everyone had to declare that what they had done in Nazi Germany to allow the denazification process to continue. Bode completed his questionnaire on the 16th of February 1949. Some people added to this questionnaire by providing proof, usually in the form of affidavits from others. In the subsequent proceedings before the main denazification committees for the district of Oldenburg and Holstein, Bode was initially classified on the 22nd of February 1949 as a fellow traveller, a Mitlaufer, that's to say Category 4. In the denazification process, fellow traveller was the fourth of 5 categories into which those affected were divided in the denazification chamber proceedings. According to Article 5 of the Control Council Directive No. 38, a fellow traveller was, and I quote, anyone who participated in or supported the National Socialist tyranny as only a nominal partisan. In particular, anyone who as a member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party or one of its branches merely paid membership fees, attended meetings whose attendance was obligatory, or performed insignificant or ongoing duties as required for all members, or anyone who as a former member of the Wehrmacht could endanger the goals of the Allies due to his abilities. Possible punitive measures against fellow travellers were, according to Article 11 of Directive No. 38, certain registration requirements and residence restrictions, the loss of the right to stand for election, certain restrictions on professional ability, and the requirement to make payments to a reparations fund. Bode, however, was very lucky. Even this category was revised to being that of an exonerated person, Category 5. In Schleswig-Holstein, denazification was handled particularly generously, possibly due to the very large number of refugees arriving there. Bode was reinstated in the civil service in 1950 with letters of recommendation from, amongst others, the public prosecutor Heinz Heinrich Anton Wolf, who had been subordinate to him in Danzig and who had meanwhile managed to wangle himself the position as the first public prosecutor in Frankfurt am Main. Wolf had a similarly Nazi past. He had studied law, graduating in 1932. On the 1st of May 1933, he became a member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, membership number 3497884. In 1935, he was a legal trainee in Limburg and district chair of the NS Reichswahrbund, the professional organisation of National Socialist lawyers, and from 1936 he was the Gau Press spokesman there. Towards the end of 1933 he joined the SA, where he served as a Rottenführer, Truppführer and press and welfare officer. After the second state examination, which he passed with good marks on the 25th of March 1936 in Dusseldorf, he entered the civil service, first in Frankfurt am Main, then in the Nazi judicial apparatus in Danzig. From November 1939 to August 1944, Wolf was a public prosecutor in Danzig, where he occasionally represented Attorney General Kurt Bode. He acted as a prosecutor before the Danzig Special Court and before the Danzig Senate, under the chairmanship of Arno Beuermann. The special courts in Danzig, part of the new administrative structure in the Reichsgau Danzig, West Prussia, established during the German occupation of Poland, were staffed by the Reich Ministry of Justice with what the National Socialist government considered to be reliable officials. According to the author Dieter Schenk, Wolf was responsible for numerous blood and ideological convictions. Thus the entire Danzig judicial system, flanking the terror of the Einsatzgruppen of the security police and the SD, implemented the intended mass extermination of the Polish intelligentsia and the population through systematic perversions of justice. In August 1944, Wolf took up a position as a public prosecutor in Traunstein in southeastern Bavaria, where he stayed until the end of the war. His denazification proceedings were concluded on the 26th of September 1947 in Bad Reichenhall with the verdict, exonerated under Article 13. How did this happen? Were those responsible for his denazification his old mates from the past who took care of him, or was he able to hide his criminal background? Although Bad Reichenhall is very close to Berchtesgaden, and in the March 1933 elections, support for Hitler was well above average. Following liberation, the town was quick to disassociate itself from those it had given honorary citizenship of the city to. Not just Hitler, but also Paul von Hindenburg, Franz Ritter von Epp, Ernst Röhm and Adolf Wagner all lost their honorary citizenships of Bad Reichenhall on the 3rd of January 1946. Hindenburg, Röhm and Wagner were all dead by this time, but von Epp was still alive. Thanks to its pre-war spa and wartime hospital facilities, Bad Reichenhall hosted a large displaced persons camp. It was as though the legal system and those who had worked in it, which had happily adjusted themselves to Hitler in 1933, now adjusted themselves to the new reality. Only 6 weeks after his denazification, as from the 1st November 1947, Wolf worked as an assistant to Otto Kranzbühler in the Krupp trial, part of the ongoing Nuremberg trials organized by the US military administration. Kranzbühler defended the industrialist Alfred Krupp von Born und Heilbach, who was accused of, amongst other things, the use of slave labour. From September 1948, Wolf worked for the Munich lawyer Koenig, and from the 2nd of May 1949 he returned to the public prosecutor's office in Frankfurt am Main. After temporarily working at the Higher Regional Court of Frankfurt, he was appointed first public prosecutor at the Higher Regional Court of Frankfurt on the 1st of October 1950. At the beginning of 1952, he became senior public prosecutor in Limburg an der Lahn and returned to the public prosecutor's office at the Frankfurt am Main Regional Court on the 12th of October 1957, where he was involved, amongst other cases, in the preparation of the first Frankfurt Auschwitz trial. It was through the support of people like Wolf that Kurt Bode was able to enter the Bremen judicial service and make a new career. His bloody Nazi past did not play a decisive role due to the lack of staff. In 1951, Bode became a judge at the Hanseatic Higher Regional Court in Bremen. In 1955, Bode was appointed Senate President at the Higher Regional Court, and in 1957 he became Vice President of the court. He also became a Deputy Judge at the State Court of the Free Hanseatic City of Bremen. He retired in 1960. From around this time until his death on the 21st December 1979, the public prosecutor's office in Hamburg, Bremen and Lübeck investigated Bode a total of 9 times, looking into the death sentences he had passed against the defenders of the Polish postal service and other perversions of justice. However, all proceedings were discontinued. On the 25th of May 1998, the Bode verdict of the Nazi military court was overturned by the Grand Criminal Division of the Lübeck Regional Court. According to the Criminal Division, there were not only formal violations of law, but the presiding judge, Kurt Bode, was guilty of intentional perversion of justice because he wanted to convict the Polish postal service workers at any price. In December 2000, the federal government paid compensation to the 53 applicants whose husbands and fathers lost their lives in Gdansk whilst defending the post office. How can we explain how murderers like Bode or Wolf managed to get away with it for so long? I think that there are 2 explanations. The first is that the creators of West Germany, and in particular those that developed the Basic Law, were victims of National Socialism, but rather than seek revenge, they chose to seek national reconciliation for the good of the entire country. Such aims are laudable, and they've been tried in South Africa or in most Central European countries, for example. However, there's also another reason. The lawyers, to a certain extent, formed a group of people who knew each other. They went to the same universities, and because they moved around would have come into contact with each other. Had the likes of Bode and Wolf and many others I've covered here not been exposed to National Socialism, then maybe they would not have become criminals. Of course, the same excuse that had a criminal not been exposed to crime then would not have become a criminal can be used for probably just about everyone. The lawyers formed what I would term an establishment group. They were not going to prosecute their own. It was only after reunification that Germany adopted an entirely new policy, which was vigorous prosecution of war criminals, which meant that comparatively minor players who had no decision-making role faced years of legal entanglements, questioning and hearings, whilst those that made the orders got away with it and died before the new policy took effect. This is certainly the case of Kurt Bode. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that interesting. I've done a number of videos relating to Nazi crimes in Poland and the beginning of World War II, and there's some links below. I upload videos every Tuesday and Friday at 2000 hours. That's my time. I live in Poland and in Germany, so that's clearly Central European time. I try to be present when videos are premiered, so that's your chance to interact with me and other viewers in real time. In order to know what will be uploaded, then I recommend subscribing. But for now, all the best from me in Gdansk, Poland.